The first glimpse of her. The first time I saw her. She was in the mirror. But she wasn't real.
Not yet.
It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that fills the air with soft gray light and silence thick enough to hear your heartbeat. I had just come home from school, my shirt clinging to my skin, my shoes soaked. Mom wasn't home. The house smelled faintly of her perfume, jasmine and something floral, a scent that always lingered a little too long. I don't know what drew me there that day. To her room, to her closet, to that soft red blouse hanging perfectly pressed against the other clothes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper, something that had been whispering in the back of my mind for years. My hand trembled as I touched the fabric.
Smooth. Cool.
Fragile. The same color as the lipstick I had once seen her wear before leaving for a party, the same shade that had fascinated me as a child. Before I even realized it, I was standing in front of the mirror, wearing that blouse. My reflection looked both strange and familiar, like seeing a version of myself that I had somehow known all along, waiting quietly beneath the surface. The buttons didn't fit perfectly, the sleeves hung awkwardly, and yet it felt right. Right in a way I couldn't explain. My chest rose and fell, my breath uneven, my pulse loud in my ears. I tilted my head slightly, watching how the light caught the red silk. For a fleeting second, I smiled. Not the forced kind I wore for photos or polite conversations, but a real one, delicate and unguarded. That was the first time I met her, the version of me who had always been hiding behind expectations and fear. But the moment shattered when I heard the sound of keys jangling in the door. Mom was home early. Panic hit me like a wave. My hands shook as I fumbled with the buttons, trying to pull the blouse off. One button slipped, another caught in the thread, and my reflection blurred behind a rush of fear and tears. "Hello? You home?" Mom's voice carried from the hallway, calm, unaware. I yanked the blouse off and stuffed it behind my back, heart racing. "Why, yeah," I managed to call out, my voice thin, cracking. When she entered, I stood frozen, half hidden behind the bedroom door, pretending to be searching for something. She gave me a curious look, then smiled softly. "You okay?" "Yeah, just looking for something." She nodded, walking past me, unaware of the storm in my chest. But I could still smell the faint trace of her perfume, the same scent that clung to the blouse in my hands. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I kept seeing her reflection, the way the blouse shimmered, the way my smile had looked, soft, real, and undeniably me. Something had been awakened, and I knew I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. The red blouse that wouldn't fade. I tried to forget that day. I really did. I pushed the memory deep into the corners of my mind where I kept every secret I was afraid to understand. But the image of that reflection, her reflection, refused to disappear. It lingered behind my eyes whenever I looked into a mirror, followed me through my days like a ghost of truth waiting to be acknowledged. The next few days, I avoided my mom's room entirely. I busied myself with school, homework, meaningless scrolling on my phone, anything to drown out that quiet ache that wanted to resurface. But each night, when the world grew quiet, that same whisper returned. "Who are you really, when no one's watching?" One evening, after dinner, I found myself standing in front of her door again. My heart pounded, but my hand moved on its own. The hinges creaked as I stepped inside. The closet door stood slightly ajar, almost inviting me in. I hesitated only a moment before reaching out. The red blouse was still there, waiting like it had been expecting me. I held it close, breathing in the faint scent of fabric softener and perfume. It didn't feel like stealing, it felt like reclaiming. This time, I didn't stop at the blouse. I found a pair of black trousers and a light scarf. When I looked into the mirror, I saw something more balanced, more complete. I adjusted the scarf, tilting my head, studying the way the lines softened around my face. And then, in a rush of impulsive courage, I whispered softly, "She's beautiful." That voice didn't sound like mine, and yet it was exactly me. But then came the sound again. Footsteps in the hallway. My heart leapt into my throat. I barely had time to pull the scarf off when Mom's voice floated in. "Sweetheart, Have you seen my…
She stopped.
The silence between us was sharp. Her eyes dropped to the red blouse, hanging awkwardly on my frame, the color bright against the dull light of the room. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I wanted to disappear. My throat tightened. I was just… Her expression softened. Not angry, not shocked. Just sad, maybe, or uncertain. You look, she began, then stopped again. Her voice was quiet, fragile. You look different. Tears welled up before I could stop them. I'm sorry. I didn't mean… She shook her head gently. It's okay, she said, though her tone wavered. Just talk to me next time, okay? And then she left, closing the door softly behind her. I stood there, trembling, staring at my reflection. I expected shame, guilt, regret. But none came. Instead, what I felt was relief. Because for the first time in my life, I had been seen, even if only for a second, and the world hadn't ended. That night, I folded the blouse neatly and tucked it beneath my bed. But I knew it wasn't over. Something had begun, something far bigger than I could understand. The mirror's truth. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Mom didn't mention what had happened. Neither did I. It was as if we had silently agreed to tuck that moment away, to pretend it never happened, at least on the surface. But beneath that silence, something was shifting. She started looking at me differently. Not judgmental, not fearful, just searching. Like she was trying to understand something she hadn't before. Sometimes I'd catch her eyes softening when I spoke, or lingering on me when I brushed my hair a little longer than usual. But inside, I was a storm. Every time I passed my reflection, a shop window, the bathroom mirror, even the darkened glass of my phone, I'd see her. Not as vividly as before, but always there, waiting, whispering quietly, "Don't hide from me." I tried to stay focused on school, but it felt impossible. I wasn't the same person anymore, and pretending to be was exhausting. I started watching videos online, makeup tutorials, modeling shows, vlogs of people who looked like me but also didn't. They were confident, radiant, unapologetic. I wanted to feel that way too, to see myself shine instead of shrink. One evening, Mom knocked gently on my door. "Can we talk?" I froze, laptop open, heart pounding. She stepped in holding a small box. "I found this while cleaning." She placed it on my desk. I recognized it instantly. The red blouse, folded neatly, along with a small tube of lipstick I hadn't even realized had fallen into the same drawer that day. My chest tightened. "I'm sorry," I started. But she held up a hand. "Don't apologize," she said softly. "Just help me understand." I looked at the floor, then at her, then back at the blouse. "It's not about pretending," I said slowly. "It just feels right, like it fits me in a way nothing else does." Her eyes shimmered with something between confusion and compassion. She sat beside me, her hand brushing mine. "You know, when you were little, you'd always borrow my scarves," she said with a faint smile. I thought it was just play. "Maybe it was," I whispered. "But maybe it wasn't." We sat in silence for a long time, the kind that feels like a bridge instead of a wall. Then she nodded slowly. "I don't fully understand," she admitted, "but I love you. That's not changing." Those words felt like air returning to lungs that had been empty for years. I smiled weakly, tears threatening to spill. That night, I didn't hide the blouse. I hung it in my own closet, next to my school uniform. It looked out of place there, but it also looked right, like a quiet declaration that something inside me had found a voice. And when I went to sleep, I dreamed not of fear, but of light, soft, shimmering runway lights, and a figure walking toward them, poised and radiant. It was her again. Only this time, she smiled back at me, learning to walk in her steps. It started small, little things I thought no one would notice. I began adjusting how I walked, how I carried my shoulders, how I spoke. Subtle, careful changes that felt like tiny rebellions but also like quiet truths. I would practice in my room late at night, moving to music I barely let myself turn up loud enough to hear. There was something magical about watching my body mirror the rhythm, the way my reflection seemed to shift, not just in appearance but in energy. It was like I was teaching my body a language it had always known but never been allowed to speak. Mom didn't say much, but I noticed her leaving small signs of silent acceptance. One day, she placed a small makeup pouch on my desk. Nothing fancy, just a few brushes, some foundation, a soft pink lip tint. No words, no explanations. Just there. I think my heart nearly burst when I saw it. That night, I tried it. My hands trembled the whole time, but by the end, when I looked into the mirror, I felt something inside me settle. The girl staring back wasn't perfect. The lines weren't blended, the lipstick uneven, but she was real. Her presence filled the room. I whispered, "There you are." From that moment on, I practiced every night. I'd watch tutorials, pause them every few seconds, try again and again until my reflection finally began to match the image I'd carried in my mind for years. The soft tilt of my chin, the curve of my smile, the gleam in my eyes, it was all coming together, piece by piece. Then one afternoon, Mom peeked into my room while I was practicing. For a second, I froze. She looked at me quietly, at the faint eyeliner, the gloss on my lips, and then she smiled. A real, small, proud smile. "You have her eyes," she said softly. "Whose?" I asked, confused. "Yours," she replied, and then walked away before I could say anything else. Those words stayed with me. "You have her eyes." It was like she was giving me permission to be her, not as a disguise, but as a truth. In school, I stayed cautious. The world outside wasn't as kind, but in my room, I was free. I walked like her, spoke like her, smiled like her. Every day, I felt myself inching closer to becoming the version of me I had only dreamed about. And then, one night, while scrolling online, I came across an ad. Open call local modeling editions. All identities welcome. I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered over the mouse, heart pounding. Could I really? Something inside whispered back. "You already are." I clicked apply. The audition that changed everything. The morning of the audition, my nerves felt like electricity. I could barely eat, barely breathe. My reflection in the mirror looked back at me with a mixture of excitement and fear. I had spent the night before laying out my outfit, simple but elegant. A fitted white blouse, dark jeans, a soft jacket. Enough to make me feel like her, but not so much that I'd draw unwanted attention on the way there. Mom stood by the door as I got ready. She watched me adjust the collar, apply a little mascara, and take one last look in the mirror. "You'll be amazing," she said simply. I smiled, but my hands were trembling. "What if they laugh?" "Then they weren't worth your courage," she said. "But I don't think they will." Her faith steadied me more than anything else could have. The studio was small but bright, tucked between two old brick buildings downtown. Inside, mirrors lined the walls, and people, all shapes, colors, and expressions, filled the space with nervous energy. Some were talking excitedly, others scrolling on their phones, but everyone seemed to be waiting for something bigger than themselves. When I signed in, the woman at the desk smiled warmly. "Name?" I hesitated. My real name stuck on my tongue, heavy and unfamiliar. Then, without really thinking, I said, "Elena." She nodded, wrote it down, and smiled. "You're up in 10 minutes, Elena." Elena. Hearing it out loud felt like a spark in my chest. A name that had always been quietly mine, now spoken into existence. While waiting, I watched other hopefuls walk the line, poised, graceful, confident. I tried to mimic their rhythm in my mind, the sway of their shoulders, the calm power in their eyes. When my turn came, my legs felt like they might give out. The casting director, a tall man in black with glasses perched on his head, looked up from his clipboard. "Whenever you're ready," he said. The music started. I stepped forward. For a heartbeat, everything around me disappeared. It was just me and the rhythm, me and the mirror in my mind. I walked, not as the boy everyone once saw, but as the person I had always been beneath it all. My movements were steady, deliberate, soft but sure. I felt her there, the girl from the reflection, the one I had dreamed into existence. When I stopped, The room was quiet. The director leaned forward, studying me. "You've never modeled before, have you?" I swallowed.
No.
He smiled slightly. "You move like someone who has a story."
I didn't know what to say.
"Come back tomorrow," he said finally. "We'd like to see you again." I walked out into the sunlight, breathless. The city felt different, brighter, alive. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to tell someone, anyone. But instead, I just looked up at the sky and whispered, "She did it." For the first time, I wasn't imagining her. I was her. And the world had finally noticed. Becoming Elena. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My heart was still racing from the night before, every beat echoing the words that wouldn't leave my mind. "Come back tomorrow." The air felt different. Lighter. I stood by my window, watching the soft orange glow spread across the sky, and realized this was the first time in my life I'd ever looked forward to tomorrow. Mom made breakfast like it was any other day, but she didn't need to ask where I was going. "You'll need this," she said, sliding a small silver bracelet across the table. "For luck." I traced my fingers over it, a delicate chain with a tiny charm shaped like a star. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "It's yours," she said. "You've already earned it." By the time I reached the studio, I felt strangely calm. The same woman was at the front desk, and when she smiled and said, "Good morning, Elena," something inside me bloomed. I wasn't pretending anymore. That name, my name, now carried weight. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with quiet excitement. Cameras clicked, lights flared, and models practiced poses in front of tall mirrors. I stood among them, part of the noise and the color, but somehow apart from it too, as if I were still dreaming. When my turn came, they handed me a simple black dress and a pair of heels. My breath caught. "Are these for me?" The assistant nodded.
Yes.
"They fit you perfectly." In the changing room, I slipped into the dress. The fabric hugged me softly, following every curve I barely had. I looked in the mirror and my reflection took my breath away, not because I looked flawless, but because I looked real. For the first time, I didn't see the old me hiding behind clothes. I saw Elena. When I stepped out, heads turned. Someone adjusted the lighting, another person whispered to the photographer, and the casting director smiled knowingly. "There you are," he said. I didn't know what he meant until I saw the photos later. The way my eyes shone, the faint smile that tugged at my lips, it wasn't just a pose. It was becoming. The photographer lowered the camera after a few shots. "You've got something special," he said. "Raw, honest. Don't lose that." I didn't know how to respond. All I could manage was a small nod, clutching the bracelet on my wrist like a lifeline. When the session ended, I sat outside on the studio steps, watching the sunlight bounce off passing cars. I felt the weight of what had just happened sink in. This wasn't just an audition anymore. It was a beginning. I had stepped into a world I'd once only dared to imagine, and for the first time, that world had opened its doors to me. And though the path ahead was uncertain, I could feel it in my bones. I was walking toward the life I was meant to live. The first runway. The email arrived 2 days later while I was eating breakfast. My hands were trembling before I even clicked it open. The subject line read, "Congratulations, Elena, you're in." I didn't breathe for a moment. Then slowly, the words settled in. I had been selected for my first official show, a small but professional runway event for emerging designers. I stared at the screen, rereading those words, my heart pounding like I'd just stepped into sunlight after years of shadows. Mom came over, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's that look for?" she asked. I turned the screen toward her, and for a few seconds she just blinked. Then her smile spread so wide it softened every line on her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." I didn't realize I was crying until she hugged me. It wasn't sadness or fear this time, it was release. The kind that makes you feel both light and grounded all at once. The day of the show came faster than I expected. The backstage area buzzed with chaos. Stylists rushing between racks of clothes, makeup artists wielding brushes like wands, the hum of nervous laughter mixing with the hiss of steamers. I found my spot near the end of the lineup, my outfit hanging neatly beside my name, Elena. Seeing it printed on that small white card made my stomach twist, a mix of terror and pride. The designer approached me, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a kind smile.
"You're new," she said.
"Yes," I replied, voice barely above a whisper.
"Good," she smiled.
"New energy is pure. Don't try to impress. Just be." Her words echoed inside me as I sat for makeup. The artist leaned close, brushing soft color over my eyelids, tracing my lips with a careful hand. "You've got a delicate look," she said. "Don't hide it." When she finished, I looked in the mirror. My reflection glowed under the lights, still me, but elevated. A softer, more assured version of the girl I was still learning to be. Then came the outfit, a sleek silver dress that shimmered when I moved. As the fabric touched my skin, it felt like it belonged there all along. The coordinator called, "Line up. 10 minutes to showtime." My heart hammered. I peeked through the curtain. The audience shimmered under the stage lights, cameras ready, voices murmuring. Somewhere in that crowd could be anyone, a scout, a critic, a stranger who might remember my name. As I waited, one of the models beside me whispered, "First time?" I nodded. She smiled softly.
"Breathe.
The lights will love you." The music started, a slow, hypnotic rhythm that built and pulsed through the floor. One by one, the models stepped out, each becoming part of something larger than themselves. Then it was my turn. I stepped onto the runway. The light hit me, blinding for a second, and then everything melted away. The noise, the nerves, the people. It was just me and the rhythm of my footsteps. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Every glance, every sway of fabric told a story I'd been hiding for years. When I reached the end of the runway, I turned, poised, calm, glowing. For the briefest moment, I saw flashes of light, heard murmurs of approval, and felt an energy so fierce it almost lifted me. I walked back as if floating. And when I finally stepped behind the curtain again, I realized I was smiling uncontrollably. It wasn't about validation or applause. It was the quiet knowing that I had become her, the version of me that had waited in silence for so long. That night, I sat in front of my mirror again, wiping away the layers of makeup, feeling every emotion settle into something new, certainty. I looked at my reflection, the same eyes, the same heart, but now I could finally say it out loud without fear. I am Elena, and I belong here. The spotlight and the shadows. After that first runway, everything began to shift, not suddenly, but in small, breathtaking ripples. The designer, who had chosen me for that debut, called again. Then another photographer reached out, saying he'd seen my photos online. Soon, I was being invited to open castings, fittings, and late-night concept shoots in dimly lit studios that smelled of makeup, fabric, and coffee. But with every step closer to the spotlight, I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me too. Modeling wasn't just posing. It was vulnerability, exposure, the quiet surrender of letting people look at you and hoping they saw what you saw, not what they wanted to see. And for me, that risk was doubled. The first time someone asked bluntly, "Were you always like this? I mean, you weren't born a girl, right?" I froze. Their tone wasn't cruel, just curious, but the question sliced deeper than they could have known. I smiled politely, said something evasive, and changed the subject. But that night, while removing my makeup, my reflection felt unfamiliar again, as if it were asking me the same thing. Who am I when the lights turn off? Weeks passed. I walked more shows, did my first proper editorial shoot, standing barefoot in the cold on a rooftop while a stylist adjusted my hair between takes. The camera flashes burned my eyes, but I held every pose, thinking of that boy who once hid his mother's scarves under his bed. He would have never believed this moment was real. After the shoot, the photographer showed me the previews on his screen. My face, calm, radiant, fierce, stared back at me. This one's magic, he murmured. You've got a story in your eyes. I smiled faintly. Maybe I do. But behind that smile, I could feel a storm brewing. Because I knew that story wasn't always beautiful, and not everyone was ready to hear it. One evening, after another long day of fittings, I was walking home when I got a message from an unknown number. Saw your pictures. You're amazing. Didn't know you were one of them. My stomach twisted. The word, them, hung heavy, poisonous. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, my heart thudding painfully. For a moment, all the light I had built around myself dimmed. But then I looked down at the bracelet on my wrist, the little silver star my mom had given me. I traced it with my thumb, reminding myself who I was, how far I had come. The next day at the studio, when someone asked me, Elena, how did you get into modeling? I smiled, truly smiled, and said, by finally being honest about who I am. The room went quiet for a second. Then, one of the girls said softly, that's brave. I didn't feel brave. I just felt free. As the weeks turned into months, I started to realize something. Modeling wasn't just about beauty. It was about truth, showing it, carrying it, living it even when it scared you. Every shoot, every runway, every gaze became a mirror reflecting back, not what I looked like, but what I believed. And I believed in her, in Elena, the woman who had once only existed in a mirror, now walking, breathing, shining under the lights. But just as my confidence began to solidify, an unexpected call would soon test everything I thought I had found. The call that changed everything. It was late, close to midnight, when my phone started buzzing. I almost ignored it. My makeup bag was open on the vanity, half-wiped mascara smudged under my eyes, and the exhaustion from another long shoot clung to me like mist. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but something, maybe intuition, made me answer. Hello. Is this Elena? A crisp, professional voice asked. Yes, I said carefully. This is Lila from Eclat Agency in Paris. We've seen your portfolio through Marquez Studios. Would you be interested in coming in for an international casting? For a few seconds, I forgot how to breathe. Paris. The name itself felt like a dream spoken aloud. Are you sure you've got the right person? I stammered. She chuckled. We don't call people by accident, dear. You've got to look raw, real, timeless. We want to see more. I hung up the phone slowly, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My lips parted slightly, disbelief flickering in my eyes. Paris. That word rolled in my head all night, like a promise too fragile to touch. The next morning, I told Mom. She was standing by the window, her hair catching the sunlight. When I said the words, "They want me in Paris," she didn't react right away. Then her eyes filled, and she laughed through the tears. I always knew this day would come, she whispered. Even when you didn't. We hugged, and for a long moment, I could feel her heart beating against mine, steady, proud, strong. The following weeks were chaos. Passport photos, fitting sessions, language practice, and sleepless nights filled with what-ifs. But underneath it all was a quiet fear I didn't dare name. What if they found out? What if the world beyond home wasn't ready for someone like me? Every mirror I faced asked the same question. Am I enough as I am? Still, I boarded that flight. Somewhere over the clouds, as the city lights shrank beneath me, I realized there was no turning back. The boy I once was had already stayed behind, and the woman I was becoming had just taken her first step into the sky. Paris was a blur of lights, rain, and languages that danced like poetry. The agency's office sat tucked in a quiet street lined with cafes and ivy-covered buildings. When I walked in, heels clicking softly against the floor, the air seemed to shift. The casting director looked up. "Elena," she said with a faint French accent. "So you're the girl everyone's talking about." Her words sent a pulse through me, excitement, fear, pride, all tangled together. She handed me a sleek portfolio folder. "You'll be walking for an avant-garde collection next month, if all goes well." I blinked. "Already?" She smiled. "You'll do fine. They said you've got something different. Keep it." Different. The word that used to make me hide now made me stand taller. That night, as I walked along the Seine, the city glittering around me, I realized what this journey had truly been about. It wasn't just about modeling. It wasn't even about beauty. It was about becoming visible. For years, I had lived behind fear. The fear of being seen for who I really was. And now, I was stepping into a world built on visibility itself. But deep inside, I knew something else too, that the higher I rose, the more fragile that light could become. And soon, one single moment, one truth, would put everything I'd built to the test. The truth beneath the lights. The day of the Paris show arrived with a kind of stillness I'd never felt before. The sky outside the venue was heavy with clouds, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Backstage, the air hummed with motion, designers darting between racks, stylists whispering final notes, makeup artists painting calm over nervous faces. I sat quietly at my mirror, my reflection framed by rows of bright white bulbs. "Elena, you're first in the lineup," someone called. My heart jumped. First. That meant all eyes, every camera, every heartbeat in the room, on me. I closed my eyes and let the noise fade. I could hear Mom's voice echoing in memory. "Don't hide who you are. Let them see you." I opened my eyes again. The woman staring back was no longer pretending. She was real. The show began. As I stepped onto the runway, the light hit like sunlight breaking through clouds, blinding, warm, alive. The audience shimmered ahead, a sea of unknown faces, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I walked with rhythm, each step steady, precise, a quiet symphony of everything I had endured to stand there. Every camera flash felt like thunder. Every second stretched like a heartbeat. And when I reached the end of the runway, I paused, just long enough to let the world see me, truly see me, not as a secret, not as a label, but as Elena. The applause that followed was soft at first, then grew, building, swelling, a wave of sound that lifted something inside me I hadn't even realized was still buried. I turned and walked back, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, careful not to let them fall. After the show, reporters filled the hallway, voices overlapping. One of them stopped me. A woman with sharp eyes and a microphone asked, "Elena, there are rumors about your past. Care to comment?" My chest tightened. There it was, the truth I'd feared might surface in this world of glass and light. For a moment, I wanted to walk away. But then I remembered the little red blouse I once hid in my closet, the first mirror where I whispered my name, the silver bracelet on my wrist. I took a breath. "There's nothing to hide," I said softly. "I wasn't born into this. I became this. Every part of me you see here was earned. It's not a secret. It's my story." The hallway went quiet. The reporter lowered her mic. "That's brave," she said finally. I smiled faintly. "It's just the truth." Later that night, I stood on the hotel balcony overlooking Paris, lights glittering below like stars scattered across the earth. The wind played with my hair, the faint scent of perfume and rain mixing in the air. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "Saw the live stream. You looked beautiful, my Elena. You made the world see what I've always seen." My hands trembled as I read it, a tear finally escaping down my cheek. I whispered into the night, "Thank you." Not just to her, but to everyone who had doubted, questioned, tested, and pushed me. Every moment had built me, shaped me, brought me here. As I turned to go inside, my reflection in the window caught the city lights, soft, golden, endless. I didn't see a boy who once hid behind fear anymore. I didn't even just see a model. I saw a woman who had walked through her own storm and turned it into a runway. And for the first time, I didn't need applause or cameras or lights to feel it. I already was enough.